Hi, I'm Masha Bennett and I would like to share with you my favourite top 10 tips for troubleshooting with EFT. As you may already know, EFT is a fairly simple and a very forgiving procedure, and even beginners usually get some really good results with it for a variety of psychological, emotional and physical issues. But sometimes we do get stuck, and even experienced practitioners may have difficulties with EFT, for example when there are no shifts happening, or perhaps the problems seem to be getting worse and the person is overwhelmed with emotion. So whether you're using EFT for yourself or to help others, try some of these tips if you ever get stuck, and I hope that one or two of them will help to shift the problem and make some progress. So the first tip is, if EFT doesn't appear to be working, is to be really specific with your words. For example, if you're sad, it's not enough to say I'm sad, or even though I'm sad. In your setup phrase, in your reminder phrase, do indicate what it is that you're sad about. What is the trigger? What is the cause for that emotion? And that will help you to be much more specific and get a better result. Similarly with physical issues, if you're tapping on some tension or aches, describe it in more detail, describe where it is located, and you're likely to get a better result with it. The second tip is to make sure that you're well hydrated. Drink plenty of water before and during doing EFT. The process does seem to take up water, so people often feel thirsty. If you've done EFT for a while, you may feel quite thirsty. So make sure there is a glass of water near you at all times and keep topping up on it. EFT and related therapies may not work as well if you're dehydrated. The third tip is for those occasions when it's difficult to find words to describe the emotions or thoughts you're experiencing about a particular problem. Perhaps it's too complex or overwhelming. On those occasions, what I would recommend is to focus on the physical sensations related to the problem instead. Focus on the physical sensations, describe what they look like, feel like, if you could touch them, what the texture would be, is there any sound associated with them. So you're creating a metaphor associated with a physical sensation, and tap on that description. And even though you may be not naming the problem directly, maybe you don't even know what the problem is, but focusing on the physical sensations, describing them in detail and tapping on those should give you a result. My tip number 4 is, if EFT is not working for some reason, one of the possible solutions is to stop for a little while, to move about, to perhaps do some physical exercise. Sometimes we get stuck with EFT because our physical energy is stagnant, and moving about, maybe doing a bit of skipping or clapping or a few sit-ups, or whatever you're comfortable with, and maybe just moving into another room can help to make that shift and to unblock whatever the stuckness was. So use your physical body to help facilitate the tapping. My tip number 5, if you do feel overwhelmed whilst tapping, which is not unusual, sometimes the emotion rises and it all feels a bit too much. If you feel overwhelmed, tap without words. Sometimes again it's really difficult to find the right words to describe how we feel. It may be too much, the emotions are too strong, or perhaps the complexity is too significant for us to be able to name the problem. So just tap without words. If the emotion is strong, you're already tuned into the problem, because the words are there for us to help us focus on the problem, but the strong emotion will indicate that we're already well tuned in, so it's not necessary to use the words all the time. If the problem seems to increase or worsen during the tapping, my tip number 6 is to continue tapping. Sometimes we get a bit scared by the intensity of emotion. It seems, oh, I'm getting worse, I'm doing something wrong. But if you do continue tapping, if you don't get frightened by that increase in intensity, you will usually get a result pretty quickly. And it is preferable to do that rather than to just stop tapping altogether and try to block or control that emotion in some other way. So if the emotion is rising, if it's increasing, just allow it and tap along, and you will experience the relief pretty soon in most cases. For some people the difficulty is that they don't like the feel of certain points. It can be uncomfortable, painful, unpleasant. And my tip number 7 is to just use the points that you feel comfortable with. If there is one or two that you don't like, just miss them out. EFT is a very flexible procedure, and most of the time we do not need all the points. So miss them out and see what it feels like using the rest of the points. And your dislike of those specific points may actually decrease with the tapping on the rest. And you may find them acceptable after a little while, but if not, just stick to the points you're comfortable with and you're most likely to get the result. Also, some people don't like the sensation of tapping itself, in which case you can just touch the points or massage them gently, or use any other motion or any type of touch that is acceptable to you, and you will still get some results with that. My tip number 8, for tapping in public. Many people feel a bit embarrassed about using EFT in public because it does look a little bit strange. For that I would recommend using the finger points. It is much more discreet to use the fingers, and many people will rub their fingers naturally when they're stressed or nervous. So tapping gently or rubbing your finger points should be fairly discreet if you're in public. If you're quite experienced with EFT, you can also imagine stimulating the acupressure points just in your mind's eye, and that is likely to set off the same physiological response as actually doing it. So try doing imaginary tapping as well when you're in public. My tip number 9, sometimes we have a difficulty with saying the self-acceptance phrase during the setup part of the procedure. Sometimes we don't feel we accept ourselves, sometimes we feel we hate ourselves, and for people with certain difficulties such as severe depression, severe addictions, and some other chronic difficulties, I find that some people find it extremely difficult to say something positive about themselves. In these cases I would suggest to vary the words, to change the words to something that would be acceptable to the person. For example, it may be possible for you to say, I'm okay, or deep, deep, deep down, I'm okay. Or I accept a part of me. Or perhaps I'd like to bring healing to this, or possibly I accept that this is where I am now. So it doesn't have to be I deeply and completely accept myself. It can be anything positive about yourself, including any statement of hope or wish for healing, and that will usually do the job. My tip number 10. If a part of you is resisting the change, if it seems that you're sabotaging yourself, for example, again in severe addictions, eating disorders, there is usually a very strong self-sabotage component. What I would suggest is to try to imagine that part of you that does the supposedly bad behaviour, that does what you disapprove of. drinking, smoking, taking drugs, overeating, and I'd like you to imagine that part of you that is responsible for that behaviour, and just be curious about what its purpose or intention might be, because I do believe that every part of us has a positive intention, a positive purpose, and it's trying to do a job for us, even though sometimes it may do it in quite disruptive and inconvenient way for us. It can be harmful, but I do believe that getting acquainted with those parts of us that seem to sabotage our progress is a really, really important part of healing. So if you do identify that there is a part of you that is working against your goal, just try and imagine, what would it look like? Is it male or female? What would it be wearing? How old would it be? And by the way, all these answers could be quite different from what you expect, and that part of you doesn't have to look or sound the same as the normal you that you know. But just try to visualize what that part is like, and try to have a conversation with it and find out, what is it that it's trying to do for you? How is it trying to help? In my experience, those naughty parts of us usually have a very, very important purpose to fulfill. So once you find out a little bit more about that part, any emotions or thoughts or judgments you have about that part of you, I would suggest tapping on that and see and hear your relationship with that part of you transform gradually. So these are some of my favourite tips for troubleshooting in EFT. I do hope you find them helpful. Give them a try and have fun with it.